And good afternoon, everybody. So hope you had a nice lunch and you still have energy to participate actively into this session. So it's our last session for the meeting, and we will talk a little bit about instruments to promote a circular economy. So what we can do beyond EPR. Let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Francesca Montevecchi. I am a waste management, circular economy, and plastic expert. And I had the pleasure in the past, I've been working and investigating the field for the past 12 years. And especially in the past 3 years, I've had the pleasure to cooperate with some of your countries, so including Vietnam, Indonesia, Cambodia, Myanmar, the Philippines, in supporting your governments in developing plastic and single-use plastic roadmaps. So together with my colleague Michael Azenov that you already met. So with that, we hope we got a little bit of flavor of what is happening in some of the countries, and also to be able to contribute to the EPR discourse. So just a quick recap. I mean, we've been talking about circular economy the past 2 days, so I will not get too much into the theory behind. Just want to remind what the circular economy principle is. So this is a relatively, let's say, new concept. At least in Europe, we have had it around for the past 10 years, but it's actually a concept that is quite old. And it includes, it proposes to minimize the resource use that is entering into the economy. So to keep control of the material flows that are entering into the economy, to minimize the waste that is getting out from the system, to keep the embedded material and resources value within the economy, and to regenerate ecosystems. Let me also add on what has been said this morning, which is circular economy is a paradigm that is relatively new. Before that, we heard a lot about resource efficiency or cleaner production, and they were focusing a lot on the production side, on keeping the energy use as low as possible, or to keep the resource use in the production as low as possible. With this new paradigm, with circular economy, we really try to keep the materials in the economic circle, in the economic flow. And in doing that, at least to my opinion, there is a greater involvement of consumers and a little bit of a wider thinking on how to design these products to be kept longer in the economy, but also how to stimulate this reuse, repair of products, also involving consumers and developing innovative business models, what we call circular business models. So there are some buzzwords that we can use to explain the concept of circular economy, which is reuse, redistribute, remanufacture, repair, recycle. Recycling is still an important component of a circular economy. And in the presentation, one of the first presentations of yesterday's, you saw a list of R's. So we can describe the circular economy with quite a long list of R's. Getting a little more into the detail, and I'm quite happy that actually during the previous presentations, many of the presenters already introduced some of the concepts. So I will fly over some of these concepts to try to give you an overview and a flair of what can be done. As said, product design is something quite important. We want to design our products better so that they can be better disassembled, sorted, recycled. We want to make products, and this applies to a lot of product categories, including electronic appliances or textile or furnitures, you name it. We want to make them easier to repair, more durable. We want them to live longer, not to break at the first occasion. So to put it in a more simple way. We also want to have a certification and labeling for these products to make consumers sure of what they are buying. If we talk about production and distribution, for instance, We have other policy approach that we can use. This is about, of course, investments is always a big issue on how also to develop innovative solutions. So it's research, development, and innovation. Is more resource efficient production. This is still from the old paradigms we translated into circular economy. Probably the most innovative thinking is in the consumption. So what the circular economy tries to do is to keep this product longer in the economy by sharing them, creating new economic business so that products can be shared by multiple users. And in doing so, we would need in principle less products that are used and shared by many consumers. So we would need less materials in principle. Or GPP, that stands for Green Public Procurement, which is a more sustainable way to procure public services and goods. This is considered an important way to promote circular economy, more sustainable products, because these are public expenditures. So there can be also more security for the investors. It can really kick off the launch of certain more sustainable products. In Europe, we're also talking about reducing the VAT taxes on reused products. So if you bring, for instance, your electronic appliances to repair, and I guess this is really Sweden that is doing that, you pay a reduced VAT so that consumers would be encouraged to repair their old smartphone or laptops instead of throwing it away. About the materials, as we know, recycling is an important component of circular economy, but we need to be sure that what we recycle is safe and can guarantee that the products have the same functionality and safety for the consumer. So we want to phase out hazardous chemicals. This is another part of circular economy. We want to enhance the traceability of certain components, of certain materials, of certain substances. We can have labeling for doing that. So again, these are certification on products that guarantees the user, the recyclers, the consumers that the products are safe, that the materials is safe. For that, obviously, we need standards. We need standardized methods to measure that so that there is a leveled playing field. And of course, waste and recycling is still an important component and part of circular economy. EPR is certainly part of that. There are different nuances of EPR as we saw these 2 past days. We can have deposit refund schemes, take-back schemes, or EPR in the form and ways that we have seen in these 2 days. We can have hand-off waste criteria that certificates that the waste that we produce can be reused for recycling or for other applications. Yeah, upcycling, downcycling, these are all different nuances of the recycling. So as you can see, there is a wide range of policy instruments that can be used. And what I would like to do now is really to give you practical examples of policies for 3 waste streams that we have seen this past 2 days. And at least what we are thinking to do in Europe with plastic packaging, batteries, and waste that will come in the next slide. We haven't managed in Europe to apply everything. Also, let me mention that in Europe, with circular economy, we are developing this concept, but some of these ideas are still at the early stage. But I think still it's an important food for thoughts also for the Asia Pacific, because we certainly don't want to have the same tiny development. So we needed 30 years, for instance, in Europe to develop EPR schemes. We're working on circular economy for the past 10 years. Worldwide and globally, we are running out of time in terms of climate change, resource depletion. We need absolutely to leapfrog somehow the process and speed up. So I hope that with this, I give you a little bit of food for thoughts of what can be done to promote circular economy in these waste streams. Starting from plastic packaging. We heard that already that as part of the EPR schemes, but not necessarily as part of the EPR scheme, we can ban certain single-use plastics. There are also economic instruments to promote the reduction on the use of certain single-use plastic, which we know might be very, very difficult to be collected, might be very difficult to be recycled. Just think about food packaging. It's contaminated, it's dirty, it is recyclable in principle, but it can be very difficult and costly in the practice. Of course, I mentioned again restriction and on the use of certain hazardous and chemicals also in plastic packaging, because if we want to recycle the plastic and the material, we need to make sure that it's safe, especially if we want to use it for other food packaging, so food contact material. Taxes on raw material and plastic are in the discourse in Europe, not very popular among manufacturers, but there are discourses around it. So to tax the virgin material. Design. So improved design is something else that we can do to improve circularity of plastic packaging. One classic example, for instance, is minimum recycling content. We have heard a little bit about it. In Europe now, it will be mandatory to use 25% of recycled material in PET bottles. We know that PET is quite easy to be recycled. It's a material that is quite easy to be kept in the economic loop. Again, labeling, better design of plastic that can be better recycled. A classic example is the dilemma of multi-layer materials. This is very difficult to be recycled. So you have, for instance, disposable coffee cups for your coffee to go. This is in principle labeled as recycled in many contexts, but we know that it is paper combined with a very thin layer of plastic that makes it very difficult to be recycled and very costly. So better design is also something that we can apply. Microplastic is something that hasn't been mentioned because it was a little bit maybe off topic, but there is discussions in Europe to eliminate the microplastic that is intentionally added into products. Think about the microbeds in the toothpaste that makes your teeth shiner, but yeah, this is plastic that enters into the water bodies and stays there. And then we found out it also enters into the human body. Another interesting thing that we can do with plastic packaging to make it more circular is to introduce refillable and reusable packaging. This can be a very simple idea. For instance, replace in public buildings the water bottles with water dispensers. This is a very simple idea, but it can get more complicated. Like I know that there are some food platforms that distribute the food online delivery platform in Asia that are starting to introduce refillable food containers. So you as a consumer, you would subscribe to the system, and every time that you order food, you receive it in this refillable container, and by next order, you give it back, and it will be washed, and it will be used for the next delivery. This, of course, requires a systemic change of thinking, because companies will need to think how to organize the food system. This is one of the big challenges of circular economy. Talking about batteries, we heard from Wine this morning that in Europe we introduced a batteries regulation. So I was lucky enough to be part of the evaluation study for the Commission to propose different measures for batteries. And these were among the proposals. Not everything made it into the regulation, but this is certainly something that is interesting to think. I mean, the fact that Europe did not do that does not imply that the Asian Pacific countries cannot do that and initiate something of these initiatives. One of the proposals, for instance, was to ban the small disposable batteries. I'm talking about the AAA small batteries, what you would find in the remote control, or the small button batteries, and just to make the rechargeable batteries to be placed on the market. What we have in Europe now, for instance, is the introduction of a single charger for the electronic appliances and devices, so that all smartphones will have just one type of recharger charge. We don't have so many around, and this should help also circular economy. Something interesting also is the discourse about the mandatory removability of batteries from your small IT appliances. If you try to open your smartphone, most of the time you will not be able to detach the battery. And the battery usually has a shorter lifetime or can have a shorter lifetime than the appliance that is embedded in. If you cannot remove it, you will have to throw everything away. We would like to make batteries removable from the appliances. And then, yeah, also innovative business models. I mean, for instance, take back and collection schemes for WEEs. We don't have to forget that batteries, most of the time, I mean, portable batteries are embedded into power tools, the driller, the electronic toothbrush, and so on and so forth. There were also discourses around take-back schemes for this type of appliances. And then let's talk about WE, or triple E, electronic appliances. And here the discourse becomes quite interesting because at first, one of the priorities should be to increase the operating lifetime of these appliances. So there is something that is quite interesting in the discourse, which is obsolescence. Obsolescence is this phenomenon that makes products useless, even if the product itself is still functioning and could still have life. There are three types of obsolescence. The first one is consumer obsolescence. It means that after 2 years, you own your mobile phone, you want the new model, even if the old one works perfectly. And this is due to trendy consumption patterns and fashion in the consumption patterns. Then there is a product obsolescence, which is that the product breaks prematurely. I mean, we don't have really proof that the industry is doing this allegedly, but let me tell you one thing. There was an interesting paper from 1920, so about 100 years ago. It was from America. And to face and to overcome the economic recession, obsolescence was the enemy to fight. So the industry wanted to make product less durable. Otherwise, if products would last forever, there would be no economy. Just let me tell you another fun fact. There is in America this light bulb that was produced so nicely and is still burning, still lightning after 100 years, and it's never turned off. And let me tell you another fun example. You know, ladies' stockings, so the stockings that the ladies put on the legs. Ladies probably here know that this is a classic product that you put on and after 2 minutes it's already broken. Back 60, 70 years ago, when obsolescence was not a topic, there were these leggings and stockings that were able to be linked to 2 cars and were able to pull one car to the next. They were so resistant. So there is some indication that, yeah, there is some certain obsolescence embedded in the products, doing it for the, being for the low quality of the raw material, for low production quality, and so on and so forth. Certainly, we would need to increase the lifespan of electronic appliances if we want to address circular economy. One way to do that, and one innovative circular business model is, for instance, to stimulate the attachment of the consumers to their device. So to make it more customizable, to make it more, you can maybe change the cover and make it really your own product so that you're more attached to it over time and you don't want necessarily to replace it after 1 or 2 years. Repair is a big issue around electronic appliances. In order to increase the lifetime and promote the repair of appliances, in Europe, we are starting to think about what is called the right to repair. It is actually nowadays still very difficult to bring your old appliance, that is something like your laptop or smartphone, to be repaired, because very often there are no guidelines on how to do that, and the repair shops might not be necessarily the manufacturer, so they don't know how to do that. Or they don't get to the spare parts. They don't have the parts to replace what has been broken in the appliance. Another important point, so a policy to promote this repair is, on the one hand, warranties that the repaired product works as a new one, because as a consumer, if you buy something secondhand, maybe, you don't know, you maybe breaks the day after, maybe you will be lucky and it lasts long. But we would need warranties to make sure that consumers are stimulated to buy repaired products. We would need also some standardization of components so that for the repair shops, it's easier to treat different brands, different types of products. Material passport is something that was mentioned this morning. It's actually a passport containing information about all the resources, all the material that is in the product, so the next person that is repairing it or recycling it knows exactly what is inside. Otherwise, it's pretty impossible. Something else that is interesting, it's about digitalization. So we have artificial intelligence that is quite advanced, or it's advanced quite fast. Through artificial intelligence, it would be possible, or it is already possible to a certain extent, to have predictive maintenance. So the machine itself becomes intelligent enough to know when it's about to break and what needs to be maintained. There is a company in Austria, they are producing large electronic equipment for industries, and they are already proposing as part of their business model this predictive maintenance. So the industry would buy the appliance, and the appliance is in this package that allows that if the machine is about to break, the company can send some worker or some technician to repair exactly what needs to be repaired without even needing to look for the faulty part, because the machine will tell you. And he said it is something that will help circular economy in the future. Again, about reuse, it would be important for electronic appliances also for the consumers to know exactly the condition, the location, the availability of products, how long it's been going around. And one last piece that I can share with you is about circular and the innovative approaches and business model. And it's about dematerialization. So we know that all of our data are progressively shifting towards the cloud. And this, I mean, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily good, because the cloud consumes a lot of energy. So we don't have a problem with energy efficiency, but from the material and resource use, this dematerialization might also help, or at least the researchers are thinking that this might help to decrease the total number and amount of devices that we're using. So with that, I hope I gave you a little bit of a flair of what can be done, or what are the little more innovative and out-of-the-box thinking for circular economy for certain products. And now I think it's, unless there is questions from the audience, which I will be happy to address, I think we might be ready to move to our panel discussion. So I would like to, so we have an online participants from Fiji. So I would like to ask our support to connect us to our panelists that I will introduce in a bit. And I would also like to invite our panelist, Alexandru Opronenko, which is here in person, to join our panel. I will be sitting with you. And I would like to, so let me do ladies first. I would like to welcome our two panelists from the Ministry of Environment from Fiji. So we have Miss Eva Yosivini and Deepika Sharma. Hi, and they are both environment officers with the Waste Management and Pollution Control Unit at the Department of Environment, Ministry of Environment in Fiji. Hi, and welcome.
Hi, good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Hi. And as I was introducing, Alexandru Opronenko, who is the innovation advisor at the UNDP Bangkok Regional Hub, and he is an expert and has been working with systemic changes, digital transformation, and innovation. So let me just get, I don't have the questions here at hand. I will need to look on the screen. Can you please just quickly make the questions, because I don't know them. I would like to read them just very briefly. Yes, the questions up there, just so that I can read them once for the. Okay, we would like to address the following three questions. The first one, what is the readiness of your country to implement circular economy solutions? Just to have a little bit of a brainstorming, so to go beyond just waste management. The second question that I would like to pose to our panelists is about what would be the most important products and waste streams to be targeted? What could be the priorities? Because you like it or not, but we need to establish also priorities. You know that there's limited resources, human resources and financial resources. We need to start somewhere, baby steps. And then an important question that I would like to pose to our panelists is about the type of support that would be needed to implement circular economy principles. So for instance, from our from the UNDP, what type of support could be guaranteed? So I join you again here. And yeah, maybe for the first question, I would like to address our panelists online from Fiji, so Eva and Deepika. And maybe you would like to, yeah, talk a little bit about the readiness of the country to implement circular economy solution without needing to get so much in detail with the policies that can be implemented or not, but just to give us a little bit of an overview. Thanks.
So thank you. First of all, it's our pleasure being part of this workshop. So I'd like to start. So Fiji's economy is at a crossroad and it's adapting to the need to utilize locally available resources amongst the increasing cost and the transportation of raw materials sourced from other countries. There have been efforts from private recycling facilities and municipalities to set up stations for the purpose of recovering of materials which have been driven by the need to reduce the increasing waste disposal cost. The government of Fiji recognizes the importance of managing waste and controlling pollution. The Environment Management Act 2005 and the Environment Management Waste Disposal and Recycling Regulation 2007 sets out the legal framework for waste management and pollution control in Fiji, driving towards circular economy. However, starting from 1st January 2020, the manufacturing, sale, supplies, as well as the distribution of single-use plastic have been banned in Fiji. The import-export of polystyrene, commonly known as styrofoam, containers, cups, plates, and trays were also banned from 1st January 2021. Fiji also controls the imports of plastic through Customs Prohibited Act. In 2022, this year, March, the Ministry of Environment launched a policy on 7R for waste management. The 7R in itself presents a major component for achieving a circular economy in many of our sectors. Fiji is also working on a CDL, which is known as Container Deposit Regulation System, which uses a deposit and a refund system to recover beverage containers. A preliminary study conducted by the Department of Environment in collaboration with UNDP determined that Fiji consumes about 50 million beverage containers per annum. CDL will enable us to extract a larger quantity of recyclable containers from the waste stream. The transition to a circular economy can keep the value of resources and products at a higher level and minimize waste production. Thank you. So this is how I'll address my first question.
Thanks. Yes. So I mean, if you want to already to move to the second question, you already partially addressed it, but please.
Yeah, I'll allow my colleague Eva to address the other two questions.
Thanks.
Thank you, colleagues. So with the Fiji government, some of the products that can be extracted from the waste streams, this would include plastic bottles, tires, aluminum cans, recyclable plastics, papers, glass bottles, organic waste that could be converted to fertilizer, batteries, and also waste electronic and electric equipment. That would be the answer to the second question.
Great.
And for the third question.
Please, yes, sir. Let's address also the third question.
And for the third question, what type of support would be needed for successful implementation of circular economy principles? For us in Fiji, to ensure that resources and commodities continue to be traded within the Fijian economy, there is a greater need for a circular economy now more than ever before. Thus, sustainable-oriented innovation is needed in order to attain environmentally friendly practices. Sustainable-oriented innovation is to encourage organizations to redesign their operations, to reduce the use of resources, improve the way non-product items are managed, and to introduce eco-friendly, eco-efficiency in their activities. Therefore, an extended producer responsibility, or EPR policy, need to be developed. In the process of EPR policy development, funds and resources are required for successful implementation of circular economy principles. Furthermore, other support required for successful implementation of the circular economy principles are separation of waste at source. Thus, more awareness needs to be undertaken. The need for more recycling facilities in reducing the burden at the landfill and dump sites, extension of waste collection services to rural and maritime areas, and finally, the manufacturer should rethink in the process of product development whether the product will fit in the circular economy principles or not. If the product does not fit in, then the manufacturer should not produce it if it is not needed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Actually, whatever I communicate you already, that I would like to explore more one aspect that I am aware of, what is in the Fiji. So Fiji is composed by a lot of islands. Is a developing country made up with islands. So this poses the problem of transporting the waste for the treatment, for the recycling. And I know that there is some companies that, as part of their CSR policy, they support the waste shipment, so the waste transport from islands to island to allow the disposal, treatment, and recycling. Would you like, please, to elaborate a little bit more on this, so that we give a little bit of inspiration to the other countries which have so many islands? So maybe I can ask.
Yeah, thank you for that.
We have another Fiji colleague here that was. Would you like to join us shortly here? Just very short, or I give you the microphone. I think this would be very interesting for the other participants. So if you could share a little bit.
Oh, yes, sure. So we were just describing how one of the largest shipping companies has a working partnership where essentially they transport all the plastic waste outside of Fiji free of cost, because we in Fiji don't have a lot of waste processors. So it's extremely hard for collection mechanisms to work because people assume that nothing else is going to happen after. But successfully, especially in the western part of Fiji, we've done lots of collection, which is then baled and sent off through support with free containers, particularly with China Navigation via shipping. So just wanted to share that example. Yeah.
Thanks. That was, sorry for confusing who was sending me the information, but I think it's really important. It's really a nice example on how producer can take a little bit more of responsibility, and especially it's a very, very specific geographic condition. So I would like now to turn to Alexandru, and I would say that we don't speak about a specific country, but maybe a little more about the Asia Pacific. If you can share based on your experience, what do you think is the readiness of the region? Also, maybe taking different clusters, because there are countries that are more advanced, countries that are maybe less advanced. But let's reflect a little bit about the readiness of introducing circular economy solutions in the Asia Pacific. So,
thanks, Francesca. And definitely, I cannot speak actually to the whole region, right? Our experience on developing this system-based approach to support transition to circular economy has been pioneered just in a couple of places like Vietnam, obviously the Philippines. I think Zainab is taking some of this work ahead in Fiji. We also have some work happening in Pakistan. So I would actually refrain perhaps a bit from kind of putting a ranking. And I also believe that there are different dimensions to it. At least once you kind of, I think your presentation is really great in terms of kind of highlighting what are the key entry points for a circular economy transition. I think where the challenge is in particular in the Asia Pacific region is actually how we make it work, right? And there are, I think there are a couple of kind of predicaments that partly hold us back. And one is obviously, sorry for tautology, is obvious, right? And this is what we discussed quite a lot. What is the technology? What is the product? What is the process we need to change to shift from the planned obsolescence about which you talked to these RRRRs that along the circular economy loops that we meet. But I think what is really important is actually what surrounds it, right? We have the conversation about policies, right? And we can, of course, point to the countries like Indonesia, who have a holistic system-based circular economy strategies. That kind of overarching frameworks overall for the policy effort, right? And perhaps not many countries in the region can boast this type of a policy effort. But then we start coming to practicalities of translating policy to real action. And I think there are a couple of things that are not being paid enough attention to in the region. One, and you partly talked about it, is of course finance, right? We are talking about a very different market model, as you said. And the market model that we have now, right? You cited a paper that is 100 years old. I think it started before, right? And there is obviously a political economy of these, and obviously behaviors and cultures that are invested in it, right? So, and I think to work that around, I think there is much more to go into it, right? One piece is finance and thinking about what actually can be the financing instruments to put in real life all those wonderful ideas and entry points into the production and design cycle of the products and services as well. But I think another critical point here is what it means for the economic model. To what extent actually companies and industry is ready to make the shift, right? Because we are talking about a completely different type of economy. That would be the first thing. I think another one, and if you look at the European Green Deal, you have made quite some progress in terms of actually redefining the role of state in supporting this new market. I think to a great degree, though, of course, we cannot paint it with one color, and governments in the region have very different approaches. But I think in terms of developing a new market, we have very little experience where actually state started playing a very different role. I would make a parallel with development of the solar industry, solar panel industry in China, or renewable energy in Germany. Those things wouldn't happen without a very targeted focus, state investment, not just in R&D and connecting R&D into the market, but also in terms of using different instruments that can give signal to the market, but it can also drive the new demand, right? So you were mentioning quite a couple of great things like green procurement, different types of taxation, right? If you look at it, our governments have a very big palette of tools to shift the supply and demand, right? And green procurement, taxation, incentives programs, R&D programs are just part of that. Again, we don't need to go far to look back into the COVID pandemics and to see how some governments started actually resetting their relationship with companies around recovery post-COVID, right? When the massive checks were rolled out from the public sector. For instance, in the EU, and I think in this sense, it's a very good example, when the government said, okay, you don't have relief packages from us if you have your bank accounts and all the stuff and offshores. Just forget about it. We don't have to save you. I think the same logic needs to be applied to the state financial policies in relationship to the market to support this transition. It will not happen by itself, and it will not happen just by technological innovation. So I think that's another key point. The third, perhaps really critical point for me is attention to the local ecosystem. I think a bit of a problem that we have is that we are trying to copy kind of a best practice models from other countries. And of course, EU in a way sets agenda, but I think it would be a mistake kind of to wholeheartedly just copy paste whatever EU does into the very varying context in Asia. And I think what I would add here is looking to the local solutions, starting from packaging, alternatives to plastics. Asia bounds an example of that, to the way how actually you develop local businesses, and at the same time how you, another important thing and a critical difference is the role of the informal waste picking sector and the whole political economy around that if we really want to shift the conversation from waste management to circular economy. The last point just I would make here, and I think I didn't hear it today at this part of this panel, but when we talk about circular economy, it's not just about protecting environment. It's obviously climate change and all that, but it's actually setting a very different economic model that means also jobs, incomes, and this kind of stuff. And I think what we found in our experience, for instance, in the city of Pasig in the Philippines, what was really powerful, this reframe from just looking after the environment to actually presenting it to the mayors as a new economic opportunity. And that allows us to bring other partners in the government, be it national level or the city level, to the conversation and to start looking very different opportunities. Why? Linking back to the finance point, ministers of environment usually have the smallest budgets, right? Knowing how the government works, it's a leftover. Culture, youth, environment, it's all kind of whatever remains. These ministries get it, right? And I think this is very wrong. And one of the hacks, perhaps on the practical level, to overcome that is to start connecting circular economy agenda, not just to environment, but to economic transition. Okay, we'll stop here, otherwise.
I just drop a comment here. I think the power of circular economy is that it's called circular economy, not circular environment. So really the attention is back into the economy and how to make this new business model and how to make business out of it. Otherwise, I fear that if it would be just solely about the environment, it would not have gained this momentum globally. And I also would like to comment back on what you said, that we cannot translate one-to-one the experience of the EU to the Asia Pacific. I think this is a very valid point, because at first there is a different level of economic development. I mean, just to mention, for instance, reuse of products. In Europe, which is, most of the countries are economically well developed, reuse was brought back into the society and among consumers as a fashionable thing. And this might look very different in the Asia Pacific. So I think, just to drop a comment, it would be also very important in this innovation thinking, in this systemic thinking, also to really bring the social component, to understand how to bring consumers to embrace other consuming patterns, more sustainable patterns. And this will look very differently if you're talking about Asia Pacific, and even if you talk specifically about different countries than in Europe or than in America. So thank you for this contribution. Maybe you would also like to comment about the priority waste streams, let's say in the Asia Pacific, or if you have specific countries. I mean, I have my own opinion on that, but I would like to hear also your opinion. What would be the priorities if we have to set a couple?
Thanks so much. I think perhaps there are, for me, there are two ways to look at it. One is obviously the energy intensity of production. I think this is an obvious criteria to go by, because again, I think talking about fashion, right? And it's really funny, right? I'm happy not to see you know, these garment bags here with the logo of the conference, because this is what happens, right? Famous story, let's ban plastic packaging, and everyone start producing and sharing the garment bags, right? No one looked actually at the whole cycle of producing and using garment bags. So there is actually Danish research that shows you need to use one bag 15 years to offset the impact, energy impact and climate and CO2 impact of producing that bag, right? The same goes with all this kind of a metal straws and this kind of thing. This is fashion. And perhaps it's good that we can drop plastic when it's not necessary. But I think we also need to take this kind of a whole of the life cycle perspective. And I think this is critical to circular economy. And this is where energy intensity is perhaps one of the big things, right? So that's for me one of the key criteria. And again, I think it's more or less similar even to what, for instance, EU would have or other places to a great degree. It's IT, it's construction, it's textiles, and plastics, of course, right? So, but then I also think where it's really critical, I'm trying to look at it from the perspective of perhaps of consumer and what fashion is and generational transition, right? I think we observe very interesting generational transition across Asia, where actually demand of consumers starts shifting, right? And things can become can be defined as fashionable, but they can also stick if framed rightly, right? And I think in many places where, for instance, our work in the Philippines or Vietnam was always kind of preceded by ethnographic research, by understanding different categories of users in the city that is relevant for plastics to waste and potentially to circularity. And I observed this very dramatic shift in terms of what are the perceptions of younger, perhaps a bit better off categories of people as opposed to the others. And I think this is another opportunity where I would perhaps stop looking at the products as such, but if we can define that streams, I would start looking at the kind of models of economy, right? So, you know, I don't know, I picked this up from the World Economic Forum that they have these 5 categories of reshaping circular economy. They have circular inputs, sharing economy concepts, product as a service, product use extension, and the last one is resource recovery, right? And I think this one around new business models like sharing economy is something where going forward, perhaps I would put a bit more premium because it shifts the logic about how we actually use something, not in terms of material, but our logic why we need it, what we want to do it, and how, right? So I think that would be, for me, a critical thing to look at going forward.
Thank you. So I pretty much agree with the streams that you pick up: construction, textile, and plastic. I think they're crucial, and also I take away mostly this shift to other business models, this sharing economy, this thinking away from products, solely from products, but transforming it into services. Something that is really the soul of circular economy. Maybe I heard a bell, so I think we would need almost to open the floor to our participants, but I would just like to ask you very briefly about our last question that was about what type of support do you need that the Asia Pacific countries or the countries you have been working with would benefit the most, for instance, from UN organizations such as UNDP? A couple of examples maybe.
Okay, I think we shouldn't open this conversation because then kind of this is what we were trying with colleagues, some of them in the room, to promote. We call it portfolio approach, but effectively what we try to say. Of course, there are a lot of interesting solutions, project, even government level initiatives here and there. I think what is lacking is coherent framework, connection between them. That has guided what we discussed as systemic understanding of the issues, where we really need to put our money and policy effort to start shifting things, right? And for us, of course, it partly depends on the place, but for us, one is this creation of new market, how we can start building local ecosystem at the city level to support circular economy transition, how we engage public, not just as consumers who start demanding different types of goods, but how people can benefit of this local circular economy transitions. And of course, the implication for the government. So long story short, I think where the really critical support is needed is this work on policy coherence between different stakeholders. I think If you look at public, private, civil society, communities, everyone talks a different language, and everyone tries to push their own thing, which is good in itself, but it doesn't bring a collective impact. And secondly, I think it is putting money to what we talked about, right? I don't think the money is there, and I think our big problem is how we bring on big companies into this conversation beyond part that relates to waste and to recycling and all of that. I don't think we have good financial models to put together and private financing to drive that transition.
Thanks. So it's basically policies, financing, and local ecosystem, bring the circular economy to local ecosystem. Thank you so much, Alexandro. And I would like now to, we have, I guess, 7 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. And I would like then to open to the audience, if you have any questions to our panelists, or if you have any comments, or maybe if you want to comment on the questions. So if you want to share with us what would be needed in your countries as a support, how mature you think is your country in embracing the circular economy path. So I invite you, anybody, to share comments or a question, if any. Somebody that would like to break the ice, great. I bring you the mic. Thanks.
Thank you. So just share, I would like to, on the question about the readiness for the circular economy. So just want to share about the Vietnam. So we started just a few years ago with the Vietnam Environmental Protection Law when we introduced the concept on the circular economy in the law. And since then, there have been a number of discussions, and there are several policies such as the circular economy strategy introduced by the Ministry of Planning Investment. And currently, Monre, our colleagues here, are preparing for the Circular Economy National Action Plan. So I mean, basically in terms of principles and the determination of the country. So yes, that's confirmed. However, once we go into policy formulation, so there will be like a number of debates and discussion about what would be the unique elements of circular economy, because a number of things have already been there. I mean, even for decades. For example, waste management, waste recycling. So without the concept of circular economy, so this thing is still going on. So I mean, in terms of writing down some kind of paper, so we need to find some kind of, I mean, unique part of circular economy. And one of our discussion is on the design phase and also the innovation part, which is very important elements for this. That is one. The second one is how to measure the circularity. Very key, important for the policy making process. Otherwise, we just say everything in principles. We need to go for more circular today, like today and tomorrow and next year. I mean, there's nothing to measure. So, I mean, without being able to measure, so the policy makers are very hesitated to put it into the policy. One of our questions we often receive is, for example, we go into such detail like recycling rate. Or are we ready to say like until 2025 the recycling or the circulation rate of the waste water in a certain industry will be like a 50%, and a target in the 2030 like a 75%. So those indicator needs to be there to really support the policymakers to put into the policy. But in order to have that, we do need some research and kind of baseline research saying, oh, okay, so this is a garment industry or textile industry. You need to make your circulation like a 20% this year, and 5 years later, it's going to be 40%. So those kind of scientific research and the practical study will need to be in place and really input for the policy making process. So just to share the case in Vietnam. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this contribution. Yeah, this is a very nice takeaway and something that hasn't been widely mentioned these 2 days is about metrics. So we know how to measure recycling. We know about circularity or the recyclability, circularity worldwide. We have metrics for that, but for all the other policy measures, we don't have actually metrics. The European Commission has developed some monitoring framework for the circular economy package. So if you are interested, you might have a look at this paper. But yeah, I completely agree with this point of that you added a little bit of novelty also to the discourse. So I just realized that we are about 13 minutes ahead of Shell. So I would like just to give the opportunity to anybody else who would like to drop a comment or pose a question before we move to our coffee break, and then we are ready to have our final discussion. So anybody would like to give contribution? Oh, gentlemen.
Hi, Adam from Maldives. Just thought Fiji also is dependent on imports, so any kind of import side interventions that the country has thought of to sort of make it easier for the waste management or recycling is limiting, instead of bringing in a lot of components, just reducing it to certain components like PET. Has there been any plans made? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Thank you for your comment. So anybody else before we, otherwise I look at Shin, we're ready for maybe for coffee break. Shin, give me a yes, give me a thumb up. Okay, great. So thank you so much to our panelists online from the Fiji. Thanks, ladies. It was a pleasure having you on board. Thank you, Alexandru, also for your valuable contributions and input and food for thought. Oh, okay. I hope you got a question from our contributor. Okay, I did not get it. So did you get the question? So the point was about import. So you import a lot of plastic, and the question, very simply put, is this: is there any tax regime to control at least the quality of the plastic that you import to the Fiji? Is there any taxes behind that can control the quality of the plastic that you import, if at all?
We have a controlling system through Customs Import Act. So we do see what type of plastics are coming in, and there are certain plastics that are exempted, the intended use, and most of the plastics, like we do not allow them in. They're just certain plastics in rolls and sheets we allow.
Okay, thank you. And sorry for that. I thought it was a comment more than a question. So sorry for that. And thanks for answering from our panelists from the Fiji. So, okay. Guess we're ready then. I'm looking, but there is no, no, there is another comment. Please, sign up.
Thank you. Just wanted to make an addition to that. We've also, if our Fiji colleagues allow and have the time, we will plan learning exchange between Maldives and Fiji as well, just in terms of like learning, because it is quite a unique context. In some cases, almost starting at a blank slate with certain island countries. So it'd be good to kind of just get a better sense of what we could do more at a systemic integrated way. And Maldives has done a lot, so great opportunity for us to learn.
Thank you. So, okay, looking at the clock, I guess then we can now really close the session. So I will meet you back again in 2:45. So time to grab a quick coffee. 15 minutes and we meet here back to then have a final discussion round. And thank you so much to the panelists for joining us. So thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to our panelists. Thank you so much. So welcome back. And I think we are now ready for our final discussion. So there has been a lot of input during these 2 days. And I would like, before we start the discussion that will happen at your own table, I would like just to very quickly summarize the key messages that have been given as input during these 2 days in the very valuable presentations and different interventions from the audience. So let me do that just very briefly in 5 minutes to give you this last food for thoughts before we start our discussion. At first, we learned that in the Asia-Pacific region, the implementation of EPR, it is at different stages depending on the country. So you're starting from different levels. The important is that you all will get to a certain development. EPR is a crucial element of circular economy, but is not the only instrument. This is important. This means that EPR is primarily about waste collection and waste management and to promote recycling, but it's not just about that. There are other elements that are important for a circular economy that we learned from your countries are already part maybe of your legal framework or for your thinking. So the EPR system can also include bans and reduction, for instance, of plastic consumption. It can impose or aims to promote and stimulate better design of products, for instance, of electronic appliances, right? It can include also the requirement for producers to introduce standards for design, standards for recycling. It can promote reuse. Think about this refillable, reusable packaging that I was mentioning before. We heard about eco-modulated fees. So those who produce better products pay less. We can have as part of EPR systems, waste recycling, waste prevention targets, waste reuse target, can get very creative of that. And then as part of EPR system, you can have other tools like end of waste criteria, obligations on producers to promote awareness raising, awareness campaign, cleanup campaign. So there are different elements and policies that you can attach to your EPR system. Another lessons learned that I think it's important to remind is that the implementation of EPR is something complex, not necessarily, I mean, complicated, but complex. It's a complex system. And having a legislation in place, it's important, is the first step. But then operationalization and implementation needs to follow this. I think it's really important to remember. Another key message that we got is about the involvement and role of municipalities. So what is the role of the municipality? Are they the main collectors? Are they cooperating with the private industry? Are they out of the issue? This really depends on the local conditions that you have and how you want to develop the scheme. But the role of the municipalities needs to be thought in the system. Then another important message is that EPR has several building blocks which are important and needs to be part of the way you build the system. You need to identify the products and define the products. You need to identify the producers. You need to organize the collection system. So we heard that you can have one PRO, multiple PROs. You can have competitive versus monopolistic systems. And again, this can change from country to country. You also have different ways to organize the collection of the fee. You can give it to PROs. You can have environmental funds that collect this fee and spend it for waste collection, or the producers organize themselves directly for that. So different nuances to do that. the monitoring control is really important. You want to know who are the producer, you want them to register, you want to have the data of how much they put on the market, because based on that, you will calculate the fees. And this needs to be fair for the industry to be accepted. You want everybody to pay their fair share. Also, the allocation of responsibility is an important part of EPR, as well as the auditing and verification. Once this manufacturer report into the system and you have the data, you want to make sure that there are not free riders and everybody pays his fair share. So these are, I guess, the main building blocks that we need to keep into account. We also have different challenges. We heard about different challenges. We heard about the resistance of the industry that might be a little bit resistant to be part of the scheme. So that is important. And it's another challenge how to identify these manufacturers and register them and let them be part of the system. Data collection, we heard, it's another challenge because you might lack the basic infrastructure to do that. Usually you want to do that with electronic databases. Maybe you might want to build on the existing databases for waste, but this might imply some work. You need the infrastructure to do that. So this can be identified as a challenge. We heard a lot about informal workers and how to involve them, because most of the informal workers, they make their living out of collecting certain valuable materials, and you phase them out and you formalize the system without thinking of them. You put in danger the life of many. And then we also heard about shifting the burden to other countries. If one country has EPR and another country does not have EPR, you risk to start to have shipment of products, of waste towards those countries that are not developed enough. And we want to avoid that. Another lessons learned that I would like to pass on to is that data is essential here. Data is essential because you want to track the amount of products that are placed on the market so that you can allocate the right amount of fees on the producer and everybody pays his fair share to make the system fair and accepted by the producer. And also data is important because you want to know how well you are progressing. You want to monitor the progress towards the target. And then I would like to highlight the last point, which I think is crucial. That is, we talk a lot about circular economy, about a lot of measures, but let me remind you that waste collection and separate collection is essential for circular economy, because you can have the best designed product, the best eco-label products in the world, but if you don't collect them, and if they land in the landfills or in the ocean or as part of marine littering, you don't do anything with eco-designed and labeled products. So waste collection and separate collection is essential to make the recycling of these products economically viable. And EPR is really a powerful tool to improve waste collection and separate collection and to provide the funding to do that. So said that, I would like to invite you to discuss among your tables and among the participants that you have around you. We will need to be a little bit shorter than 1 hour, so we will have half an hour to discuss among your tables these 3 questions. These are reflections from the 2 days. Number 1, what are the priority actions to promote the implementation or operationalization of EPR? Maybe you would like to discuss it with your neighbor at the table. It would be also interesting for us to understand and learn from you what can UNDP do to support government's work on EPR and circular economy. And last but not least, maybe you have some points, the main lessons learned that you would like to report back. So half an hour to discuss within your table about these 3 questions. We will have half an hour. Then I invite you to nominate a rapporteur for each table so that we can have the very last plan, and each table will report back to the plenary, and we can then conclude the meeting. So with that, I would like to launch the table discussion and yeah, have fun. 25 minutes, sorry. So, okay, looking at the tables around, it looks that pretty much all the tables are done with the discussion. So I'm really looking forward to hear what are your reflections about these 3 questions. So we have 5 tables, 25 minutes. This gives us 5 minutes per table to report back. And I would like to start maybe from table 1 or no, from table 3 would like to start. Sorry. So we shuffle it a little bit. So thanks, table 3. And floor is yours for about 4 minutes, 5 minutes. Thanks.
I want to be the first. I don't want to copy ideas from other teams. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm a representative for table 3, and I'm not from like the environmental background. So I will try my best to summarize for my team. So for the first question, what are the priority actions to promote the implementation of EPR? So for the first question, my team assume that the regulatory framework and legislation is there. So for the priority action are to promote the acceptance from private firms, and also the acceptance of EPR implementation from informal workers as well, because based on experiences, there is a pushback from those stakeholders. And another important action, priority action, is to develop, promote coordination between different stakeholders to develop database system for EPR implementation data, and especially the reporting mechanism for EPR implementation as well. These are the priority actions that we are thinking of, okay, for question number 1. And for the second question, I think we can separate into 2 aspects. For financial aspects, I think we think that UNDP can provide fund to implement maybe specific or model in our country. So that is the important point, the fund. So not only the fund, but also regarding financial aspects is about to have us to develop like a financial mechanism, especially on the fund management and fund utilization as well. That is important point. And for technical aspects, so UNDP can help us to develop like common procedure for implementing EPR, like a standard or principles for EPR implementation. Also, UNDP can support us to have like a sharing platform like we are doing today as well. And more than that is about capacity building for like government officials or concerning stakeholders for EPR implementation. That's all for number 2. So the third question. So there are 3 main things that are 3 main key takeaways for our team. One is that EPR is like just one aspect of circular economy. So it's not about everything for circular economy, it's just one aspect for implementing, promoting circular economy. Another thing is that EPR is, we think that EPR is a time-consuming initiative. It will take years to implement, and not sure that we can succeed. But and the last one is that different conditions. I mean, different countries have different conditions and situations to implement EPR. So that's what we have learned from the workshop. Yeah. So that's all from my team. Thank you so much. Oh, my team members can add anything if you want, please.
Okay, thanks, and especially thanks for being within the 4 minutes. And I think it's important also for the UNDP to have this little bit of input about the importance maybe of a platform, capacity building, building the finance. So, okay, I will try to go random next to the next table. Who would like volunteer at table number 5? Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much on behalf of the group table 5. would like to share with you for the first questions that we have from Francisca regarding the priority actions, because we have different stages from India that is more advanced compared to Sri Lanka that has been struggling working on that, and then Cambodia has been Vietnam has been trying to work on that, and Indonesia is also working on that. So we have been in different stages, and we learn also from Latin America that not all Latin America have been willing to share their political will. So it has been a challenge for different countries. If India has more patience to work on this, so they will be moving forward to that kind of situations in the future, and Sri Lanka will request assistance from UNDP to address number 2 in terms of the capacity and institutional building, and also technical support, financial support, and probably resource mobilizations. It depends on the situations of these global perspectives as well. And not only Sri Lanka that has been asking for that kind of support, but also Vietnam and Indonesia would like to have that kind of support in addition to the India. And for the takeaway, we need to make sure that the governments where we live in India and Sri Lanka, Vietnam, Indonesia, have a stronger political will from various stakeholders to address this kind of issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really on point. So I take away here again, capacity building, financing. This is the kind of support that would be important, and stronger political will to move forward. So thanks for this contribution. Next table would like to volunteer. Let's do a lady first. I saw ladies raising the head. Probably would be the last one. Sorry that you were the first one. Okay, Mike, please.
Yeah, so for our group, in terms of priority actions, similar to what was reported earlier, at least in countries where there's no EPR policy yet, there's a need to establish that legislation, or the complementary legislation or issuances or regulations, even for those that have EPR policies in place, and also the need to establish the office for EPR or the EPR Council, EPR office, and to be able to build the capacity of that office so that they can implement the provisions of that policy. There's also a need to have a systematic waste collection system where also segregation is a must. The reporting system or portal for the obliged enterprises will have to be established so that they are able to register and report their certificates, which will also serve as a platform for trading. And there's also a need for a mechanism to integrate learning, the financing guidelines for the use of the EPR fund, I think in the case of Vietnam, and also to establish an audit mechanism and the standards. I think in the case of India, they have yet to do that, and also in the Philippines, we have yet to establish that as well. There's also a need to establish a linkage of EPR to existing license to operate, or the tax regime, to strongly enforce EPR schemes, and or also to establish stronger linkage with local government units and also the local waste management system, which could also enhance traceability and also pushing the upstream waste collection. And lastly, the need for a cross-collaboration platform among stakeholders at national and subnational level, and of course across regions. What UNDP can do to support? Well, first, of course, support to legislation and regulations, capacity development, including for the EPR office or EPR council, establishing a platform for learning across countries, including providing good practices and, of course, the lessons learned, providing financing support, including for the establishment and maintenance of the EPR portal, data analysis to also enable refinement of the EPR models, awareness raising and development of knowledge products, support incentivizing innovations, bringing in experience from other countries. And what are the main lessons? Of course, EPR is not a silver bullet. There is much that needs to be put in place in complementation to its implementation. And here we're able to learn about the status of EPR schemes in some countries, where even for EU, we learned that it's also difficult, even though it's been in place for quite a long time now. And of course, we continuously learn from each other as we navigate our way in terms of implementing EPR in our respective countries. Thank you.
Thanks. So it's also interesting. I would like just to briefly comment that I'm hearing more and more about this platform for EPR that could be a great idea. It's like a sharing platform with best practices or cases, and this might be some nice input also for the UNDP to plan ahead some activities in this regard for the country. So thank you so much for this contribution. And then I would like now to give the floor to table number 1, which has been waiting for long. So please.
Thank you so much. I think in terms of like what we've been thinking, I think we are all working along the same lines. And from our side as well, the main thing is getting policies set in place to facilitate EPR, and also legislation to back that up. And I think just doing the legislation is not simply enough. We also need to make the primary and secondary legislations to actually have EPR implemented so that EPR is actually practiced. Then we also need to mobilize the funds that can come through the EPR scheme. So producer responsibility organizations, whether it is state-owned or whether it's producer-led, needs to be there, and they should be able to operationalize those funds towards the goals of capturing those valuable resources. Then we also need to look at the linkages between the informal sector and make sure that all the actors within the waste sector are contributing and are part of the EPR scheme where applicable. Then in terms of what UNDP can do, capacity building again from our side as well. And what was also an interesting suggestion that hasn't come up is that UNDP could also prioritize suppliers in the procurement process to be aligned with EPR, so that those suppliers can get a priority in the procurement process, so that it acts like an incentive for them. Then other than that, the knowledge sharing platform also does come up, and additionally to that, UNDP could also play a matchmaking role where they could identify nationally in different countries who are the producers, who are the recyclers, who has the technology that could be applied to other countries, what could be cross linkages between maybe say Maldives and Fiji, or maybe Maldives and India, and this kind of relationship building and capacity sharing, knowledge exchange, that kind of setup, but also at a technical level where we can also share technical capacity and experience and resources as well. Then UNDP also, through that, maybe there can be standards done on recycled content that's used in products, and also the recycling of products in country, so that there can be products that are available to the public that can also act as alternatives to the disposable ones that are maybe not being recycled. Then lastly, as the most important takeaway, we want to reiterate the importance of data, and also the importance of the quality of data and the verifiability of the data. So you should always, like they say, you should trust the data, but it should also be verifiable. And also transparency and accountability of the whole system. And I think it has come up that the stakeholders, coordination between all the stakeholder groups within the country also needs to be there, and it should be very strong, so that you can't really say one person has dropped the ball, so that it can always work towards the goal of having a well-functioning EPR. Then audits, environmental audits that can actually trace the whole life cycle of the products that are being produced, and also at the disposal stage as well. So that's it from us.
Thank you so much. So we take away from here again the importance of the informal sector, the importance of data, and this message from UNDP keeps coming out. I have a dream, I would say, a common platform for EPR for the region, where you can share best practices, where you can support each other with maybe technical capacity, and we can share the data. So this is coming out. So I would like now to give the floor to our last table, and thanks to everybody for being so to the point and crispy. So please, table number 4.
Thank you. So our group is consistent of Indonesia, Cambodia, Maldives, and Iran. We are at different stages, mostly starting out. So what are the priority action areas? So basically, we identified that there is a need to have overarching policies, legislations, like Afra said, supporting regulations as well. Also a need to define sort of what is EPR and who are the producers, because in some cases there are not much producers, but a lot of importers, retailers, and wholesalers. And in addition to that, sort of have those policy backups for getting data in. So mandatory mandating that the producers or this data be collected or given to the relevant agencies. In addition to that, there needs to be a decision on the financial models which will be used, and whether or not the government needs to adopt a voluntary or a mandatory approach to it. One more important thing that we discussed was having the sort of infrastructure or foundation in place for EPR to work as well. One of the things being segregation being mandatory. Also having the models and mechanisms needed to be established already. And then sort of looking at integration wherever possible with the informal sector as well. So what can UNDP support us on? UNDP can support the countries in doing research and studies and doing the feasibilities needed. Also providing access to finance for the infrastructure and the mechanisms, and even to do pilots, and beyond that, scaling those up. Supporting the comm strategy and advocacy as well. Supporting technical trainings and capacity development, and supporting creating this guidelines and standards as well. In terms of lessons, something we sort of discussed, and I think it relates to push and pull factors like carrots and sticks. So we learned that in circular economy and even in EPR, different countries were using different methods, was approaching it in differently, but the ultimate goal is similar. So even in circular economy, there are so many methods we can use. In our case, in Maldives case, sort of what we found was for the private sector engagement, the private sector are now more open to EPR because we have bans on pet bottles. So sticks work, carrots work, everything works. We need to just find out what works. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. So also a little bit of novelty from this table that support would be needed for technical capacity, also for implementing pilot projects, and also an interesting and important input to make segregate collection mandatory. I think this is really important to build a basic infrastructure. So looking at the clock, thank you so much to everybody for being so much on point and short and crispy. It's a lot of interesting input. So we can declare this discussion round concluded. And I would like now to first thank you so much for being so active and participating in this. And yeah, I will now hand over to Shin so that she can make this wrap up and conclusion of the meeting. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.